And it is my pleasure to talk to an old friend, Menexia Tsoubeli, who I had the pleasure of knowing and working with at Campbell Soup for 5 years. And now she's running a division at Firmenich, but I'll let Menexia introduce herself, and then we'll get into some questions that we have for her, especially how she's been so successful at influencing the business. But before I get ahead of myself, let's let Menexia say hi and give us a little bit of your background, Menexia.
Absolutely. Thank you, Carlos, first of all, for this opportunity to talk to you about my experiences. My name is Menexia Tsoubeli. I'm in this business, the food business, for more than 25 years, most of the time in an R&D capacity and working for Campbell's. And as of late, a year and a half, I joined Firmenich in a very different capacity, leading the business for Savory, North America for Firmenich. And definitely a very new and different experience for me. In terms of my technical background, I have my roots in chemical engineering and a PhD in food science. And as I always talk about, my three circles that characterize me, and I feel very passionate where the three merge. That's where I do my best, is the art, the science, and the business. And definitely being from an engineering background, food was the area that fulfilled certainly all three of them from a cultural standpoint and from a business standpoint.
Oh, that's great, Menexia. And you know, I like to say we're chemical engineers by training, but in the food business by choice.
Exactly.
Much more interesting when you can eat your products, right?
Exactly. And also see them and share them with your family and friends.
Great. Well, listen, Menexia, you know, one thing that's, you know, you've heard me say in the past, and I think you really bring it to, or let's say, a living example of doing it in practice, and that is how R&D in particular, as a function and as a discipline, can be influential, not just to the R&D world, but to the business itself. And I was always impressed at how well you inserted yourself into the business, the influence you were able to have, not just on the technical side, but on the running the business and real business matters. And given your technical background and your career in R&D, I thought it would be really helpful, particularly for those in the audience who maybe are in similar roles in R&D or other functions where they perhaps feel like they should have more influence or would like to have more influence on the business, or sometimes, as we say, a seat at the table or a voice at the table. And so I'd like to just get your thoughts on your experience, your tips for those who are interested, to say, here's some things you need to think about if you want to go beyond, let's say, just being a solid technologist to really being a business partner.
Yes, absolutely. And I have to say, to give a little context, I did mention I worked for Campbell for many years. I did start at the bench and then worked my way through several positions to being a division leader. So definitely it's a journey. And influencing, I found, and having a seat at the table was necessary to be able to have that advancement, but also being able to have impact, which to me was, at the end of the day, what I was looking for. It's to have impact and being able to be where the action was and give to our consumer what they really wanted. So that was what was motivating me. Some of the elements that I have learned through the journey in order to have the seat of the table is a couple. And one of those elements, and that's where I would start, is to really know your stuff, you know, develop the technical credibility. We start from there. Always sharpen the saw, learn about all the developments in the field, and build a relationship of trust when it comes from a technical standpoint. Another factor that is extremely important is to also understand the business. Understand the business in a holistic way, what will make it successful, and also be used to the business language. Communicate with business leaders in the language that they are used to, in the context that they are used to. And another one of the factors is to simplify the technical. language. And as a technical leader learns how to communicate in a business way, an equal important factor is to learn how to simplify the technical message and making it relevant to a business leader or a business audience on what is the so what it means to them, what do they need to really retain, what do they really need to understand to be able to make decisions, and make the complex easy and tangible for them, put it in the context of the business environment and deliverables that they found themselves in. And another one of the factors is to come across as an R&D leader with a mentality of how could we versus here is what we should not do. Technical leaders.
Do you find that's a problem with a lot of R&D folks?
I find that as technical leaders, we are processing very quickly a lot of information, and we are trained to pinpoint the problems because we are problem solvers. And that's a huge strength. That's why we make a difference in a lot of the organizations. We understand the problem and then we find the solution. So we have a tendency to focus there. And when it comes to being able to influence, sometimes we might have a tendency to come across, to do that processing on our own minds, and then come across with all the reasons of what the business leader might need to be very careful about, what they need to consider, and what are all the risks around the proposition. I have found that in order to influence successfully, R&D leaders need to train themselves to have that how can we mentality, understand the business objective, and once you pinpoint the problems about it, come up with alternative solutions. Educate as to why some of the things might not work, but then more importantly, since we have understand the destination and the problem we are trying to solve from a business standpoint, what are other solutions that we can put on the table to make it happen? And I feel that.
Yeah, that's I mean, that's a tremendous number of tips, and makes a lot of sense. Now, let's just build a little bit on this, the point that we're often trained to point out all the problems, which can be really critical to business. But if all you're saying is here's what doesn't work and why not, to your point, that's one that's not very motivating, and it doesn't, at the end of the day, doesn't move the puck forward for the business. How do you strike that balance? Because you don't want to say everything's fine when you know there are issues. I mean, you do want to still point out the flaws, particularly if they're technical flaws, but even if they're not technical flaws, if you know from your experience that there's a business plan that is flawed, how do you balance that with the fact that you don't want to just be the one always saying, no, it can't be done?
What I have found has worked for me is to go back to state your understanding of the business objective and ground the conversation on the business strategy and the business objective, to explicitly state where that you understand as a technical leader where we want to go, and endorse that. It is if we agree, we're at the stage of the conversation that we have an agreement that that's a shared objective that we all share, is for the business leaders to understand, to feel that their technical lead truly understands where we want to go as a business, and spend time to really do that.
What do you do? What do you do when now if you have a business leader that is already, let's say, comfortable, has confidence in you because you've built your technical credibility, but you've also shown your business acumen and knowledge of the business. But what if when you have somebody, let's say, who is not as familiar with you, or is used to R&D being more, let's say, more of a technical expert, somebody who gets told what to do versus somebody who really has not just a seat at the table, but a voice at the table? How do you deal with those leaders in particular?
I think asking questions to understand, to show your interest in understanding the holistic business case, and position yourselves differently in the context of the conversation is very helpful. And and introduce yourself both from an understanding, introduce or position yourself both as a business leader and on the same time with an expertise on the technical aspects. In other words, reintroduce through you the R&D and what R&D can bring to the table. I feel that a lot of barriers disappear when the context of the conversation is leaving the strictly technical territory and is being reasoned into the strategic aspect of the business, and also the R&D leaders position themselves as a source of solutions and to drive the business. I feel we're a lot of times there is a little bit of a gap is how technical solutions can drive the business. And I think connecting the dots and being articulate about that is very helpful for the R&D leader to position themselves as a business partner.
Well, that makes a lot of sense, Menexia. Now, so far we've kind of focused on what we can do as R&D leaders to influence the business. But of course, our audience is more than just R&D folks. We have a lot of business leaders themselves out there. And what advice would you give to them? Because perhaps they're not taking full advantage and leveraging the power of their R&D folks. And what would you say to those folks in the audience who maybe can get more out of their R&D team or especially their R&D leaders?
The advice that comes to mind is to spend a little bit more time with R&D and understand what R&D does and how they can be leveraged as a multiplier. I find that sometimes R&D is being brought into the conversation a little bit later to either execute on a certain direction or solve a particular technical problem within a context that has already been decided. And I have found, and business leaders that follow that will attest to that, that when R&D is being brought into the conversation at the design phase of an initiative or of a proposition, then they bring a lot of value in guiding what is possible, what is not possible, what could be possible, shape the technical, through their technical lens, the direction, and couple that with the business and marketing expertise to really create the multiplier effect. And so then you unlock the full capacity of everybody in the team. And I feel that the advice is to spend more time and also try that. Give it a try. Look at R&D and demand. I know that I'm using a strong word right now, but demand from some of the R&D leaders to show up differently and at different places within an initiative.
I think demand is a good word. I think often for some reason we're hesitant perhaps to make those kind of demands. Or we could call them requests if we feel more comfortable with that word. But I think the point is we not only have that, we're not only allowed to do that and the right to do that, we have an obligation to do that. Would you agree?
I totally agree. And what unites us is at the end of the day, having a successful product at the market and how and position it in the best possible way for the consumers. So I think when we look at it that way, we are not serving different parts. We're not serving different objectives, I should say. And being on the same page from the get-go, I feel that it makes a very big difference. And also for the business leaders, I would say another additional thought is how do we ask questions? Or do we ask questions in terms, for example, when it comes to designing something? It could be more closed questions. What is the solution to X? Or it could be, how would you approach XYZ when it comes to solving a problem? And I think that can unleash the R&D creativity when is being put forward that way.
Hey, that's great. Hey, I want to put you on the spot for just a minute, Menexia. And if you feel comfortable, if you could share an example from your actual experience? It could be at Campbell's or more recently with Firmenich, where you've had, you can give an example of how you've been able to influence the business and perhaps some of the challenges that you had to overcome to do that and what the result was. I think it would be really nice
Yeah,
to hear
I would
that
like
actually in practice.
I would like to share a story from my Campbell's days, and that was when I was in Campbell Fresh, where we, being a new division, we were trying to figure out how to break through in the branded space for soup versus private label space. And it was one of the occasions that a member of the R&D team had a fantastic idea of how to bridge the space between a beverage and a soup, and create a line of soups that can be reinvigorating and on the same time being utilized in a different occasion than the traditional soups. He brought that idea. It was, of course, I encouraged it as part of the R&D process. Then we went a step further beyond the formulation, build some prototypes, then a step further, build some visual designs with some containers from the container store, and then put the whole thing together, in other words. And instead of talking to the business, to our business about the idea and spending a lot of time convincing, we showed them. And so we had it on a table. They were able to see it, to touch it, to imagine it, how it would look like on shelf. Came also with some good consumer understanding and competition understanding and what was happening on that place. And we had a conversation almost building the business case for this new item. They adopted it immediately on the spot. And then we end up launching it. So I feel that the story, what I've learned from that is that when we discuss, but we do not seem to make any headway, making some effort to present the idea and bringing it to life with all the accompanying facts and building the business case is a great way to create traction and action with the business teams.
You mentioned bringing the business case, not just making the product visceral, which it makes a lot of sense with actual prototypes so people could see it rather than just talk about it, but also bringing the business case, because I think sometimes we might feel that, well, that's the job of the finance team or the general manager, but there's no reason, if you have the passion, that you can't at least learn how to and put together a P&L or a business case that shows it's not just a great idea, we can actually make some money.
Absolutely, and might not be the final, and no one is going to say that R&D people all of a sudden are going to be the finance entity of the organization, but we need to know enough to act as entrepreneurs. And if we think about it, a lot of entrepreneurs are technical. They have technical roots, and they are perfectly capable of building the business cases and bring visibility to all aspects of a proposition. And at least at the beginning stages for R&D professionals, if they have the passion to do that and have a starting point, and then of course, then the creation is for everybody to shape it and form it, and also then be open once we have it out there and it gets traction, that it will be shaped and be changed. And that's okay, because then it will become probably or most possibly better, and be open to that. I think is a great trait for an R&D as individuals, but also as teams, to possess that type of mindset.
Absolutely. Hey, listen, one thing I want to talk to you about, and that's how you put together a strategic plan. Because I got to tell you, Menexia, when I came to Campbell's and we developed our very first R&D strategic plan, you were actually in charge of it. I'm sure you remember that fondly, I hope.
I do.
And I got to say, I was so impressed with the way you orchestrated that, I mean, I think I could have hired McKinsey or BCG and it would not have been nearly as good. It
Thank you.
was
Thank you so much.
tight, it was actionable, and it was something that not only steered the R&D team, but also helped steer and influence the business. I'd just like to get, just your thoughts and how you approach that and what is important about putting together a strategic plan, because I would say that's another way you can certainly influence the business and show that you've got a voice at the table by not just giving them ideas, but also helping them really with core strategy, which at the end of the day is where are you going to make your bets and how are you going to allocate your resources?
Yes. One of the things that some of the things that I have learned through that process is the number one is what is your starting point? Where do you start? And to me, I always start thinking about the business strategy. Meaning, what do we have to deliver for the business? An R&D strategic plan can be ambitious and bold on what we deliver, but grounded on the business strategies, and that is, I feel, what makes it relevant for the business and creates the traction and how the business can then support it. So that is one of the areas that was important. The second is to also make it to solicit the feedback, but also the wisdom of multiple parts of the organization, both from the technical community, from the business community, and all aspects of the technical community, to ensure that a lot of the know-how is folded in there. And the third area to me is to build the ambition, is to have a view of what do we need, where do we need to be 3-4 years from now, and what are the technologies, the breakthrough thinking that need to accompany a strategic plan to get us there. And in terms of driving action, the strategic plan cannot be effective unless it drives action to the organization. So it needs to be aspirational, but at the same time, to me, tangible, so that people do not see it as an esoteric technical exercise, but they see it tangible as something that they can execute and break it down into strategies and action plans with deliverables and measures, so that they can see that this is something that can actually happen.
Is it fair to say that if it doesn't help you do your day-to-day job or to make decisions, then it's not effective?
I would agree with that. It needs to balance the aspiration and the boldness with tangibility and helping you, being the guiding light in a sense for the day-to-day work. Define, am I on the right path or am I off a path and off strategy? And that is why I believe also that the R&D strategic plan need to be congruent with the business strategies.
That makes a lot of sense, Menexia. So let's just change gears a little bit again. We're in the food business, and from my experience with you, you have a really well-educated palate and are quite passionate about the food you develop and produce. What influenced that? Just give us a little bit of background. How did you get to be a foodie and want to be in the food business in the first place?
Yes, that goes back to where I was deciding what I wanted to be, right? As I was growing up, I did mention that my roots are in chemical engineering, but I was always looking for that component of art. To me, this combination of art and science is what made me, I knew that was going to be very happy and worthy to meet. And I have to say, food serves that purpose, because to me, it's a culture, is what brings people together, how we communicate with one another, even if we don't know the language of one another. So definitely, it's the fabric that, if you will, that unites us in many different ways. And so that is what compelled me to go to the food industry, to be able to make a difference there. In terms of the palate, definitely my heritage. I come from a culture where food, I'm Greek, so food is paramount. We share happy moments with food. We resolve crises and disagreements with food. We entertain with food. So food is very central and essential. And that definitely has been a very big aspect. And then my transition to the United States, where without leaving the country, you get to experience a huge array of different foods and cultures and different ways of cooking. So I'm very curious about that, and I want to find out at all times what is the authentic part of the foods and the cultural element. So in terms of the palate, it comes from being fortunate to be curious about it and open to try new things and not be afraid from trying new things.
Well, speaking of new things, let's talk about food and innovation. And you obviously were with a big food company for many years, and now you're with a flavor company or ingredient company, I should probably say, supporting not just big companies but small companies as well. So you're seeing probably a bigger range. And even within Campbell's, you supported some of the smaller businesses as well, not just the large core businesses. But one thing that's true, and as you know, is that it just seems like a hugely disproportionate growth in the food business is coming from startups, from the smaller guys, and not from the bigger guys, even though they have the resources, they certainly have the smart people, they have the money. I mean, what's going on? Why is that? Why can't the large companies be the ones producing the exciting new innovation and technologies in the food business as well as the growth?
I think that when it comes to the startups, Carlos, some of the key characteristics is the unwavering passion and focus, and the willingness to take some risk, to try new things, fail, learn, and try again. That resilience and persistence that characterizes a lot of the startup founders. When it comes to a bigger corporation, the operating model is very different. Big corporations are mostly built to do well with what they do in the particular time, and all of their processes are geared towards that. So acting in that way, in a way that can be perceived risky. And as a result, it's harder within a big corporation to have the results that an entrepreneurial might have on their own. Having said that, it's a lot of times is not mutually exclusive, and we have seen that the big corporations, when they endorse a different way of working and thinking, they can be fairly successful in introducing breakthrough innovation into the market. But that needs to come with a deliberate decision to structure innovation in a different way and empower and encourage risk-taking, a different model for speed in the market, and an iterative learning. Those are some of the key elements that make the difference when it comes to an entrepreneur.
Well, that certainly makes sense, but are you actually seeing any large companies doing that successfully? I mean, it seems like they all have their own venture arm. They have various, let's say, organization structures, whether they're incubators or accelerators. And I mean, it's a real question. I don't know if it's working or not. I just wondered what your thoughts on that were.
I think that if we look at where the innovation is coming from, the market would tell us that probably is not working. And most of the innovation, the true innovation, is coming from the startups and the entrepreneurials, for all the reasons we talked about. but if I step back, a lot of those companies also support this effort through different ways. So I'm a big believer on innovation networks. And so if we step back and we look at the world from a little bit of a higher point, where the bigger corporations play a specific role to encourage and support the growth of the smaller companies, then I would say that that is accomplished in a different way. But if you put it into their traditional operating model, is definitely harder, and the market will say that that's what's happening.
So you've gone from largely being a customer at a big company for suppliers like Firmenich, and now you yourself are a supplier to other companies like Campbell's and many other food and fragrance companies. Can you tell me a little bit about the difference and how, let's say, you can help them with their innovation?
Definitely very different point of view, being on the supply versus on the customer side. What the supplier can do and what we are doing to support a lot of our clients in their innovations is offer end-to-end product development capabilities, and build a product development ecosystem that can support their innovation efforts, from being able to supply breakthrough market understanding in terms of consumer insights and trends and custom understanding to their categories, to breakthrough solutions and technical solutions, technologies that they can bring those to life, to a great array of formulation expertise that we can help them with formulation and augment their product development efforts. And on the same time, rapid prototyping techniques where we can help with speed to market, all the way to partnerships where we can test, scale up, and offer those capabilities to them. So to me, how a successful ingredient a supplier can play with the customers is to, which we do in Firmenich, is to provide this end-to-end innovation partnership.
Very good. Do you think companies can do a better job, food companies can do a better job of utilizing their suppliers, not just as suppliers, but as partners?
I do. I feel that, of course, all the companies are very open, and on the same time, I feel that there is an opportunity for R&D teams to utilize this mindset of the extended innovation network. From an R&D standpoint, having been in both areas, there is opportunity there. Some of the R&D leaders fully leverage innovation networks, and for others is a developing mindset, I should say, because it's not a competency, it's a mindset, the ability to view the world through intertwined partnerships and know when to leverage which one to get you where you want to be faster. And as an R&D leader, to be okay with that not everything needs to be created by the team or by yourself, depending on what stage of your career you are. But it's equally important to know where to access it and how quickly to access it, to give to the business and the company the desired outcome. And I found that is an opportunity that R&D teams could leverage more, to really build those innovation networks. And their suppliers are very good candidates to be part of those innovation networks and being leveraged to their fullest as part of those networks.
So is that some of the advice you might give to a younger associate, somebody who's still earlier in their career? Would you say how critical it is to build that network and start early so that it can help you get solutions for your company?
I would definitely give that advice, to be very open and understand the supply base, understand what you can leverage, and as a technical professional, be open to have things created somewhere else and leverage them. At the end of the day, who stands to win is the R&D professional who's going to bring the breakthrough solution to their company. And I see, to me, that is R&D success. Of course, is to create. We're in product development, and product developers love to create, and that's what is, makes our hearts tick. On the same time, know how to leverage solutions is another very important mindset. And when the two come together, I feel that is where an R&D professional can make a very big difference. Also, the world becomes smaller and bigger on the same time. So R&D professional can see themselves as the creator, or they can see themselves, in addition to that, as the manager of a myriad of relationships that they now have into their disposal to create very unique and different solutions. And that is the open innovation piece, and the innovation networks that I feel sometimes separate very successful R&D professionals from ones that are more limited.
I couldn't agree more. And I think open innovation is perhaps a term that's gotten so used, it's lost some of the significance, but it's so true that it wasn't that long ago when you were looking at an R&D professional, you would say, well, how deep is their expertise? And that was what you were looking for. And these days, to your point, it's much more how they can manage a network of other solution research providers, because it's a much bigger world that's, as you say, has also gotten smaller, and it's much easier to access that knowledge from around the world. But it's not easy. It's something you have to learn to do, and you have to want to do. So I think that's a really good point.
And going back to the startup mentality, that's how entrepreneurs think and get into the market. A lot of them do not own big R&D teams and different functions. They know how to access those very quickly and put them to good use. So having a new skill for an R&D professionals, in addition to the technical depth, is the ability to manage innovation networks, in my view, and also the entrepreneurial mindset. So we do use that term quite often when it comes to R&D. I think perhaps we need to codify it or demystify it. And what does the entrepreneurs really do that gets them where they need to be? So there is the what and there is the how that I feel we can decodify to help R&D professionals have that mindset.
So in your current role, you're really now more in a business role than historic R&D roles. And I'm just curious, is there anything you miss from just being in a pure R&D role?
I miss occasionally, because I'm very passionate about what I do right now, but at times I miss the direct ability to see a product in the market. And so being on the supply end, I do get to experience that through our customers. I do miss the direct satisfaction of having that done directly through my team or myself.
That's true. But I guess unless you're really making your own products for your own company, there's going to be some sort of reliance on other people.
Absolutely.
Very good. So Menexia, we just have a few more minutes, but is there any other advice you'd like to share with the audience or other people who may be interested in the field, or whether it's being more on the supplier side or innovation or influencing the business?
To me, one of the thoughts that I would like to share is the ability to learn at all times. To me, that is paramount, and continue to stretch as an R&D professional the areas that we see ourselves active. So seek new opportunities, seek a broader range of experiences. And going back to the original conversation on how to influence, which a lot of our jobs, ultimately will be that, to influence, is to try to accumulate as many learning experiences and broaden your horizons as much as possible, and take chances. learn new things, step into the areas that are not comfortable, and being resilient and persistent as you do that.
It's such important advice. And I think sometimes you don't even realize how much of that you can do. You might think, well, I'm in a certain role. How can I get that breadth of experience? And I think it's actually pretty easy. I think all you usually have to do is ask, can I spend a day with the marketing team? Can I spend a couple hours with the purchasing guys? Can I spend some time with the other category? And I think, with some rare exceptions, most people are not only happy to accommodate you, they're actually, proud that and want to share with you what they know. So I think that's terrific advice. Easier said than done, but it's very good advice. And if you do it, it's never too late. But I think the earlier you do that, the larger the amount of experience you get. So terrific advice. Thank you.
Absolutely. You're very welcome.
Any other closing thoughts, Menexia?
Let's continue to work to make the world a better place through food. I think to me, it comes down to that. Food is what unites us and what makes us happy. So the better food we create, the happier the world is going to be and more well nourished.
Couldn't agree more. So I'll certainly agree with that one. And let's just say bon appetit.
Bon appetit.